everyone, I'm Maggie McGrath with Forbes Breaking News. On Tuesday, senators grilled Pete Hegseth, President-elect Donald Trump's nominee for Defense Secretary. The hearing had some very difficult questions for Hegseth, including around allegations over sexual misconduct and controversial views over women in combat. In spite of this, he seems poised for Senate confirmation. So joining us now is one of the senators who participated in the hearing, Senator Tammy Duckworth. She represents Illinois. She is a combat veteran and a Purple Heart recipient. Senator, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me on.
So I want to start by asking, I said that he seems poised for confirmation. Would you agree based on what you saw on Tuesday?
Based on what I saw, it seems like my Republican colleagues are going to roll over for Donald Trump and confirm somebody and hold their nose and confirm this man who's highly unqualified for the job.
We will get into why you think he is unqualified, but I want to ask, if he is confirmed, then that opens up the possibility of Senate hearings for some of his subordinates. Do you think Democrats would have more sway on some of those people?
Well, I don't know. I mean, some of his subordinates, unfortunately, are probably qualified for the job, but come from a very scary position, especially if you have Hegseth as the Secretary of Defense, because now you can have a lot of mischief happening because you have the guy at the top who doesn't know what he's doing and can't supervise those subordinate to him. He's already said that he's going to look at and potentially fire all the top generals and admirals who would actually have the institutional knowledge and the tactical proficiency to run the Department of Defense. So I'm very worried as to who the leadership team is going to be at the headquarters of the greatest military on the face of the earth with access to the nuclear codes.
So you say he's unqualified, and in the hearing on Tuesday, you did focus on his qualifications. What concerns you the most about him? Is it his qualifications or is it his ideology? Like, what is the number one chief concern for you?
It's his lack of qualifications. I voted for both of President Trump's previous nominees to be Secretary of Defense, Mark Esper, whose ideology I didn't agree with, and also for General Mattis as well. So I asked both questions. They were able to prove to me that they were qualified for the job, and I voted yes on both of them. So this was not an anti-President Trump thing. This is about, who's run an organization big enough that they can step up to run the be Secretary of Defense and run a 3 million personnel organization with a budget of almost $900 billion. Pete Hegseth does not fit those qualifications.
And you are joining us today after speaking on the Senate floor about Hegseth. What did you just tell your colleagues in the Senate?
That they need to put country above Donald Trump, that they need to, they're well aware that he is not qualified for the job, and that if they truly cared about the well-being and the national security of America, that they need to vote no on Pete Hegseth.
Are there any areas of agreement that you have found with Hegseth over the course of the hearing, or anything that you heard in his plans for the Pentagon that you could see a potential path forward for compromise?
Well, I would agree with him that we should not be lowering standards within the Department of Defense for people to do the jobs to which they are assigned. He spoke at length about how he didn't want to lower standards for women to serve. Well, the standards are not being lowered for women, and nobody's asking to lower standards so that women can serve. The only person asking to lower standards at this point is Pete Hegseth, asking to have the standards for Secretary of Defense lowered so that he can have a job that he's not qualified for.
Can you paint a picture for us? If he is confirmed, what will the Pentagon look like in a couple of months? What are the policies you would expect to see? What is the potential chaos or organization that you think you would see? Well,
just right off the bat, a complete mismanagement of the Pentagon's budget. The only two organizations that he was in charge of their budgets, he ran into debt, and one of them, with a budget of just $10 million, he ran so poorly that when he was essentially fired, they had to bring in forensic accountants to go through and see what he did. Now, the Pentagon has never passed an audit. I would like the Pentagon to pass an audit. It's something I share concerns with my Republican colleagues, Joni Ernst, who says the Pentagon should pass an audit. I agree with her, but I don't think that Pete Hegseth is the guy to lead that effort.
So you and Senator Ernst agree that there should be an audit, but do you disagree on confirming Pete Hegseth?
Very much so, and I'm somewhat disappointed that Joni would basically kowtow to MAGA extremists, which, at first she said she had some concerns, but she came under such attacks from the MAGA crowd and people around Donald Trump up and down his leadership team said that they would come after her, and her, she's up for re-election. They will primary her. And like so many of my Republican colleagues, they're running scared. And frankly, I wish that they would put the national security of America over their own political survival. And unfortunately, the people with that type of courage are no longer here on the Republican side in the Senate. You don't have Sass or McCain or, Mitt Romney. He couldn't get reelected. He couldn't win a primary in Utah once he stood up to Donald Trump. So at this point, we basically have a Republican Party that's just here to do whatever Donald Trump wants them to do.
I was just about to ask, does this moment tell you anything about what you would expect to see from your Senate Republican colleagues going forward in the new administration? Will there be any standing up to the administration, or have the Republicans really closed ranks?
I think it's not so much closed ranks as it is been brought to their knees. At this point, they are on their knees and unable to stand up to Donald Trump. And that is a very scary place for us to be as a nation in a time when we have adversaries around the world looking to exploit any weaknesses that they see in our nation for their own personal gains. And then frankly, we're supposed to be leaders of the free world, and we can't do that if we don't have people at the very top of our government who are qualified to do their jobs. And frankly, Mr. Hegseth is not somebody who can do the job to which he aspires.
You serve on the Senate Armed Services Committee. You just addressed the Senate floor today. What else will you be doing in the coming days to talk to your Senate colleagues about Hegseth's confirmation? Are there talking points you're drawing on, or specific colleagues you plan to talk to maybe emphasize your point of view here?
Well, I'm happy to talk to any one of my Republican colleagues, but unfortunately, I don't think they're listening anymore. I think the fix is in. And I don't think that reason is going to work anymore, because if reason were to work, then they would be voting no. It's so obvious this man is not qualified for the job to which he seeks. I asked him some basic questions like, what type of diplomatic negotiations, security agreements does the Secretary of Defense have to lead? One of Mr. Hegseth's talking points the other day was he kept saying how, well, he's going to hire people smarter than him to do this. Well, then why don't we hire somebody smarter than him to become Secretary of Defense?
So, Senator, I have to ask then, if he is poised for confirmation, how do you see your relationship with the Secretary of Defense in the new administration and with the Pentagon? What do you think that will look like?
I don't know. I've invited Mr. Hegseth to come meet with me, and he hid and ran away from all the Democrats on the committee. He didn't meet with any of us except for Ranking Member Reed, whom he was forced to. And then the Trump team lied about why he didn't meet with us. He said that there were conflicts of our schedules, when in fact I have an email from them dated December 18th saying that they would not meet with me until the week of January 20th. And so if he's not willing to come to meet with me prior to his confirmation hearing, I'm not quite sure what type of relationship we can have. Now, that said, I've had great working relationships with all of the previous Secretary of Defense ever since I've been in elected office now. That's for 12 years on both sides of the aisle under both Democratic and Republican administrations. So we'll see what happens with Mr. Hegseth. We'll see if he even shows up to meet with me, because I'm still willing to meet with him and maybe teach him a little bit about some of the questions, the answers that he got wrong. Happy to mentor him in his job, because obviously he's not qualified or ready for it.
Happy to mentor. That's a good point. And finally, I want to ask, because you are a veteran, what is your message to the women serving in our military right now who might be concerned about Hegseth's comments about women in combat?
Well, just that they've already earned the jobs that they've had. They've already met the standards. They should be proud in the positions that they have. And that to be sure to understand that this is not about a question about whether or not they're capable of doing their jobs. This whole discussion is about whether or not Pete Hegseth is capable of doing his job, which he is not. So just focus on your mission, focus on your training, focus on your tactical and technical proficiencies, and do your job. And thank you for serving America and being willing to protect and defend all of us.
Senator Tammy Duckworth, thank you so much for joining us today. We so appreciate your time, as always.
My pleasure. Thank you.